What if I told you there's a tunnel under the ocean, so deep, so vast, and so technically impossible, that it took engineers 14 years and the power of nearly 3,000 tons of explosives just to dig through it? Not just to build it, to dig through the mountain beneath it, through volcanic rock, through geological faults, through water pressure that would have crushed most construction equipment to pieces. Welcome to the Seikan Tunnel, the second longest railway tunnel in the world. A 53.8-kilometer engineering miracle that took a nation's obsession with connectivity and turned the impossible into reality. And this changed Japan forever. Here's the thing about Japan's geography. It's absolutely beautiful, but it's complicated. The main island of Honshu and the northern island of Hokkaido, they're separated by the Tsugaru Strait. And for centuries, that 20-kilometer stretch of ocean was basically an impenetrable barrier, an invisible wall that kept millions of people isolated from the rest of the country. If you wanted to travel between Tokyo and Hokkaido in the mid-1900s, you had exactly two options. First, take a slow, unreliable ferry that battled unpredictable ocean currents and weather. That ferry journey could take up to 14 hours, and that's if everything went smoothly. Bad weather? You were looking at delays, cancellations, or even dangerous sailing conditions. Your second option? Drive around. Take the long way. Navigate thousands of kilometers of roads through Japan's mountainous terrain. Either way, you're losing an entire day, maybe more. But then something changed. By the 1970s, Japan was obsessed with connectivity. The nation had already revolutionized travel with the Shinkansen, the world's first bullet train. These weren't ordinary trains. They were symbols of a modernizing Japan. Sleek, fast, connecting the nation's major cities in hours instead of days. The bullet train network was expanding rapidly. Tokyo to Osaka, 3 hours. Osaka to Kyoto, just 75 minutes. The Shinkansen was literally shrinking Japan, bringing distant cities closer together. But there was one major problem. The network ended at Honshu's northern coast. Hokkaido, still isolated, still waiting. Hokkaido wasn't just another region. This was Japan's northern frontier, rich in resources, full of potential, but trapped by geography. The island was home to millions of people who couldn't enjoy the benefits of the Shinkansen revolution. They couldn't experience that speed, that connection. So in 1971, Japan's leaders asked themselves a wild, almost ridiculous question. What if we just went under? What if, instead of accepting the ocean as a barrier, we treated it as just another obstacle to overcome? Not around it, not over it, under it, 240 meters below the ocean floor. Through geological chaos that had defeated tunneling attempts for decades, through rock formations that engineers didn't fully understand, through water pressure that would challenge everything they knew about construction. The plan: connect Honshu to Hokkaido with a 53.8-kilometer underwater tunnel, the most ambitious rail project the world had ever seen. A tunnel so complex, so unprecedented, that nobody was even sure it could be built. This is the story of how they pulled it off. This is the story of human stubbornness triumphing over impossible geology. Okay, let's talk about what makes the Seikan Tunnel absolutely insane. It's not just long, it's deep. We're talking 100 meters beneath the seabed. That's the ocean floor itself. The tunnel plunges down to 240 meters below sea level. Let that sink in for a moment. To put that in perspective, that's equivalent to burying a 70-story skyscraper underwater and then digging another tunnel underneath it. You're not just digging underwater, you're digging deep underwater, where the pressure is immense, where visibility is zero, where the conditions are as hostile as anything engineers face on land. But here's where it gets really, really difficult. The real nightmare? The rock itself. Directly beneath the Tsugaru Strait, engineers discovered they weren't dealing with solid granite. They weren't dealing with the kind of stable, predictable rock that tunnelers dream about. No, they were dealing with volcanic strata, fractured bedrock, and, this is the crazy part, 12 major geological faults. This isn't a stable mountain. This is a maze of weak zones, broken rock, and shattered geology. It's like trying to cut through a house of cards while the house is actively collapsing around you. When engineers started drilling, they hit pockets of groundwater so pressurized that water was literally gushing into the tunnel at rates of 150 tons per hour. That's not a leak. That's a fire hose blasting at your worksite at tremendous pressure, except it's coming from the rock itself. 150 tons of water every hour. Think about that for a moment. You're trying to build a tunnel. You're trying to create a stable underground passage, and the mountain is actively fighting you, shooting water at you with the force of an industrial fire suppression system. The solution? Chemical grouting. Engineers had to chemically seal the rock with specialized grout injections before they could safely continue excavating. But this wasn't a one-time fix. It was an ongoing battle. We're talking about treating thousands, tens of thousands, of square meters of unstable rock, meter by meter, as they dug deeper. Inject grout. Wait for it to set. Test the stability. Move forward. Repeat. Day after day. Month after month. Year after year. This wasn't a problem you solve in a month or a year. The underground portion took 14 years to complete. 14 years. Let me say that again. 14 years of battling geology, dealing with unprecedented water pressure, and pushing the boundaries of what was technically possible. Visual, historical black and white photos of tunnel construction. Workers in protective gear, and the workers? They were descending into conditions nobody had ever faced before. No reference point, no historical handbook, no experienced tunnelers saying, "Oh yeah, we've dealt with this before." Just geology, grit, and an unwillingness to quit. These were engineers and workers willing to go down into a mountain beneath the ocean and solve problems in real time that had never been solved before. They were, quite literally, making it up as they went along, and somehow they kept going. First, a tiny pilot tunnel, just 17 meters wide, was bored through the entire 53.8-kilometer route. This wasn't the final tunnel. This was the scout, the reconnaissance mission. This was the tunnel that went ahead into unknown territory and said, "Okay, what are we dealing with here?" They were essentially pre-treating the rock, stabilizing it, making it strong enough to handle the massive main tunnel that was coming behind it. Then came the main bore. This wasn't a small tunnel. This was a massive 9.6-meter diameter tunnel, capable of handling double-track railway lines. Building this required nearly 2,900 tons of explosives and 168,000 tons of steel. To put that in perspective, that's approximately 23,000 individual steel frames supporting the tunnel walls. Imagine 23,000 separate steel structures, all carefully installed, all supporting the weight of rock and water pressure above and around them. And running alongside the main tunnel, a service tunnel. This wasn't just backup. This was a complete parallel system, a complete parallel escape route, an emergency access point, a ventilation system. Every 50 meters, connecting passages linked the two tunnels together. If disaster struck in the main tunnel, if there was an accident, a collapse, a flooding event, workers could evacuate through the service tunnel. This three-tunnel system wasn't redundancy added for safety reasons. It was mandatory engineering. Without it, the project would have been absolutely impossible. The pilot tunnel allowed them to map danger. The main tunnel carried the trains. The service tunnel provided the escape route and ventilation. They needed all three. It was a solution that only worked because engineers thought in three dimensions, planned for every contingency, and refused to cut corners. Okay, so fast forward to 1988. After 14 years of impossible engineering, after solving problems that seemed unsolvable, the Seikan Tunnel finally opened. For the first time in history, trains could cross from Honshu to Hokkaido without taking a ferry. They could go underground. It was a triumph, a victory, a moment of national pride. And then, almost 3 decades later, in 2016, 28 years after the tunnel opened, Japan completed the Hokkaido Shinkansen extension. Now the bullet train could finally enter the tunnel. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Hokkaido would finally be connected to the Shinkansen network, but there was a massive problem that nobody anticipated. A problem that forced engineers to confront a physics challenge they hadn't fully grappled with before. When a Shinkansen bullet train travels at full speed, 320 kilometers per hour on regular tracks, it creates pressure waves. These aren't gentle air movements. They're not a light breeze. They're intense compression forces. Waves of pressurized air that build up in front of the moving train like an invisible, powerful wall. On a regular track where only bullet trains run? No problem whatsoever. The pressure wave just disperses into the open air. It doesn't affect anything. But in the Seikan Tunnel, you have a completely different situation. Bullet trains share the tracks with freight trains. Heavy, loaded freight trains carrying cargo. And when a Shinkansen pressure wave, traveling at 320 km/h, hits a freight train going 140 km/h in the opposite direction in a confined space, the results can be catastrophic. It can shift cargo inside freight cars. It can cause accidents. It can potentially derail lighter vehicles. You're looking at safety hazards that could harm people. So here's the compromise that Japan implemented. Inside the tunnel, the Shinkansen is limited to just 160 kilometers per hour. Let that sink in. A train capable of 320 km/h, a train built for speed, has to crawl through a 23-kilometer undersea section like it's stuck in rush hour traffic. That's less than half its maximum speed, less than half its design capability. For 25 minutes, this incredibly fast train has to go slow. It's a compromise between two competing needs, moving passengers fast and keeping freight trains safe. The speed reduction costs valuable time, passengers lose minutes, but it prevents potential catastrophe. It prevents accidents. It keeps people safe. And that's what engineering really is, when you think about it. Not building the fastest thing, not breaking world records. It's building something that works, that's safe, that serves multiple purposes simultaneously, even when those purposes are in conflict. Let's talk about what this tunnel actually changed. Let's talk about real-world impact. Before the Shinkansen extension, traveling from Tokyo to Hokkaido's major city, Sapporo, took hours. You're looking at ferries, slow trains, or flying. All of these options consumed an entire day. Maybe more. Your morning? Gone planning the trip. Your afternoon? Spent traveling. Your evening? You're finally arriving. That's your whole day. Now, Tokyo to Hakodate, Hokkaido's southern gateway, takes just over 4 hours on the Shinkansen. That's the length of a standard workday commute. Suddenly, Hokkaido isn't isolated. It's connected. It's accessible. You can take a morning train from Tokyo and be in Hokkaido in time for dinner. The tunnel moved 9 million passengers in its first year of bullet train operation. 9 million people. That's not just a transportation achievement. That's economic transformation. That's social transformation. That's changing how millions of people relate to their own country. And it's not just passengers sitting in seats, drinking coffee. It's not just tourism. Freight trains carrying Hokkaido's products, fish, dairy, agricultural goods, resources, now reach markets on Honshu in hours instead of days. Do you realize how important that is? Freshness matters. Perishability matters. A fish that arrives in Tokyo 12 hours after being caught is still fresh. A fish that arrives after 2 days? Spoiled. This tunnel changed the entire logistics network of northern Japan. It changed which products could be exported, when they could be sold, how fresh they could be. The total cost, about 9 to 20 billion yen, roughly $9 billion at the time. For context, that's comparable to building an entire highway system. For a single tunnel, was it worth it? For 9 million annual passengers? For Japan's economy? For connecting an entire island to the rest of the country? For transforming how an entire region relates to the nation? Absolutely. Here's what absolutely blows my mind about the Seikan Tunnel. It didn't just happen through brute force. Every single meter, every single kilometer required solving a new problem. It required innovation. It required engineers who refused to accept, "We've never done this before," as a reason to stop. The dual-gauge track system? That was revolutionary. The tunnel accommodates both Shinkansen's standard gauge and conventional narrow-gauge trains on the same rails. The same rails. You have two different train types, with two different wheel widths, traveling on the same track system. That's not sloppy compromise. That's elegant engineering. That's problem-solving at the highest level, the chemical grouting process. It became a template that other tunneling projects around the world would learn from. Engineers studying the Seikan Tunnel learned techniques that were applied to major tunneling projects in Switzerland, in the Alps, in other impossible locations worldwide. This single project advanced tunneling technology by an entire generation. It proved that the impossible often just means we haven't found the right engineering solution yet. And here's the most remarkable thing. It's still running, every single day. Thousands of people traveling through this 23-kilometer undersea passage that didn't exist 35 years ago. They're sitting in a bullet train, maybe drinking coffee, checking their phone, reading a book, completely unaware they're traveling through one of the greatest engineering achievements of the 20th century. They don't think about the 14 years it took to build. They don't think about the 2,900 tons of explosives. They don't think about the workers who faced geological conditions nobody had encountered before. They're just trying to get to their destination. Japan built the Seikan Tunnel because they refused to accept geography as destiny. Yes, the strait separated the islands. Yes, the geology was absolutely horrific. Yes, it took 14 years and nearly 9 billion. Yes, it required solving problems that had never been solved before. Today, if you ride the Hokkaido Shinkansen, you experience what's possible when you combine impossible geography, cutting-edge technology, and engineering stubbornness. For 25 minutes, you're traveling 240 meters under the ocean floor at 160 kilometers per hour through a tunnel that took a generation to complete. Most passengers probably don't think about it. They're just trying to get to their destination. But beneath their feet is concrete and steel and decades of engineering work, and the dreams of thousands of workers who looked at a geographical barrier and said, "Not a barrier, not an obstacle, a challenge." And challenges are meant to be solved. The Seikan Tunnel is proof that human ingenuity can overcome almost anything. It's a reminder that the world's greatest achievements often come from refusing to accept it can't be done. And if you love engineering stories, the kind that show what humans can achieve when they dream big, stories about engineering marvels that changed nations. Thanks for joining me in the Seikan Tunnel. I'll see you on the next one.